Hey there, Holly Show listeners. Aaron Nabus here, and on this episode, we are joined by David Pepose, the mind behind comic books Spencer and Locke and Going to the Chapel. We last had him on the podcast back on episode 65, and of course, who can't forget the first time we met him at San Diego Comic-Con 2017 on episode 22. But today, we welcome David back to talk about his newest creation, The Oz. David, welcome back to the show, and congratulations on fully funding your Kickstarter in just
thank you.
2 minutes, right? Was it 2 minutes?
It was in 2 hours. It's 2 hours. We funded our book, and now we're at 450% and climbing.
That is so awesome, yeah.
Which is wild. But I couldn't be more shocked or more grateful. I this is my first Kickstarter, and seeing the people who have followed the OZ from my previous work, from Spencer and Locke Volume 2, and my recent book Going to the Chapel, it means the world. It takes a village to make a Kickstarter succeed. So I feel like it's a real team effort, and I'm so excited to have so many people join us as honorary Yellow Brick Road warriors.
Awesome.
So
we'll get into the OZ in just a little bit, but I just wanted to catch up with you since it's
absolutely
it's been a long time since we.
It's been a minute.
It has.
It's been a minute.
So what's a typical day like for you these days?
Since the pandemic struck, it's been a little different. I used to travel a lot for conventions,
mm-hmm.
and so now it's sort of hunkering down and focusing. That's been kind of my goal for 2020, and I feel like I've done pretty well with it. Doing a lot more writing, doing a lot more story development, experimenting in terms of form and distribution. A typical day for me, it's changed a lot over the last few months. Just getting as much writing done as I can is really a big one. I had been, doing my freelance work at Newsarama as their reviews editor. I actually just stepped down.
After 12 years, right?
After 12 years
wow.
of writing for Newsarama. It's the longest relationship I've ever had. I've been there, pretty much just a few months after I graduated from college. I realized that I was hitting a ceiling of how much I could do wearing both hats. And, I had more book announcements that are going to be coming out soon that made me realize I couldn't wear both hats for much longer. So, focusing on that, focusing on, how I want to pivot my business in a post-COVID environment. As you might know, I did a lot of my work at conventions. I did a lot of on-the-ground outreach, and I missed that. But without having conventions and without them being safe at this moment, figuring out how am I going to bolster up my social media? How am I going to bolster up my web presence? And then just, working on different types of projects. I've started working on a bunch of anthology projects, which is really exciting. I've got stories of a bunch of different lengths, and that really helps me out in terms of finding new artists to work with, just because it doesn't take nearly as much of their time as a full series. And then working on actual miniseries that I'm really excited to be sharing over the next few years. I'm actually working on my first horror book right now.
Oh wow!
Which is exciting. That's a genre that I've always wanted to tackle, and I want to build up those muscle groups. So yeah, we're in uncharted territory. I think that's the best way we can say it in the world today. But I'm just trying to make the best of it as best I can. I'm grateful that I'm healthy. My partner, she's healthy. My family is healthy. And beyond that, just trying to hunker down and build up that war chest of material for when the world finally reopens again.
And I think that's a good point because now is a really good time for creatives to just hunker down and get busy.
Yeah, I mean, I when Diamond had their temporary shutdown, that was I wrote a lot during that period, and it was actually pretty freeing for me because you know I didn't have to worry about what else is coming out. I think the direct market, and it's one of the worst things about the direct market, but I understand structurally why it is this way. It fosters a little bit of competitiveness. There's that lizard brain feeling of, oh, this person got a big thing, and that must mean instinctively that there's less attention for me. And that's not always true. And sometimes people are getting gigs that you were never in the running for, or that you wouldn't have even wanted to be in the running for. So it's yeah, I feel like having that Diamond shutdown meant that, oh, we're all on the same page here. We're all sort of figuring out what the next moves are. And I think that really kind of freed up a lot of my bandwidth to really sort of put out as much work as I felt possible.
So, are you working on pretty much on your own projects right now, full time?
Yeah, yeah. I have a little bit of freelance work, just to keep some health insurance, which is nice.
I hear you.
Yes, beyond that, which thankfully that position has been very flexible for me. I've been focusing pretty much on my own work. I've got another book that's going to be announced. It's coming out next year, probably in the next couple of months. So I've been working on that, working on production work for the OZ, just for the future installments that we have, because this will be the first of 3 Kickstarters for that book. We'll be doing, what else we'll be doing? Am I working on? I wrote a YA book. I'm working on Spencer and Locke 3 right now. I'm finally sort of caught up with my backlog besides that horror project. So I'm back to work on that. Like I said, some anthology stories. I'm actually working on a superhero one shot with my Spencer and Locke brother in arms, Jorge Santiago Jr. Since while he's waiting for me to finish up the Spencer and Locke 3 scripts, I wanted to make sure I had some work for him. And so, he's working on a superhero concept that I've had in the back of my head for a very long time. I'm finally excited to show it off. And it's keeping busy. That's I think all I can do in this situation. I think it's easy to feel a little powerless, in the state of the world today. And for me, I sort of see my role first, in terms of just trying to keep my career going, trying to keep, building up that war chest for people, but also, just to keep releasing work as best I can. If our books can provide even a little bit of a respite for people, then that makes me happy. I don't consider myself an essential worker by any means. So whatever we can do to kind of give people our support, that's my mission right now.
I think that's really powerful. I mean, even though you're saying that you're not essential, I think you providing value for people out there is such a wonderful thing.
Right. Thank you so much, man. I know. I appreciate it. It's like it's just, yeah. I mean, I just sort of try to see it as what is my sphere of influence, and I think for a lot of creators, the world's kind of shifting under their feet, and so trying to see the bigger picture and trying to see okay, what's the next steps here. That's really been sort of a journey that I've been grappling with since COVID hit and since the temporary shutdown for Diamond, and so yeah, I've had the time to get a little philosophical, you might say.
As some of your followers may know, not only were you part of Newsarama, but you also started as an intern at DC Comics.
Yeah.
You got DC Fandom going on this weekend.
Yes.
And
I'm actually wearing my DC intern shirt right now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Didn't mean that. It wasn't intentional. I feel like the guy wearing the band's shirt to the concert. But yes, no, I loved my time at DC. Yeah, for those, I guess, who Or sorry, I rolled over your question.
Oh no,
Finish your
no,
question.
you were probably going to address it, but I was going to ask your sort of take on everything that's been happening at DC.
Yeah. So, I've, well, as far as fandom is concerned, because I've only sort of been able to pop in and out today. But, I saw that trailer for that new Batman game, Gotham Knights.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I mean, it taps into James Tynion's Detective Comics and Scott Snyder's Court of Owls storyline. And I'm sure, intentional or not, there's through lines to Devin Grayson's run on Batman Gotham Knights. All three of those are some of my favorite Batman stories. So that sounds very cool to me. I saw that trailer for Suicide Squad. That looked really cool. And even the Snyder cut of Justice League, while I think a lot of the discourse around it has drawn out some of the more toxic elements of our fandom.
Right.
I, even as somebody who wasn't the hugest fan of those movies, I'm very curious to see how it looks. Just because I can respect somebody going into their third movie and it horrible tragedy taking them away from it. I'd be the same way. I'd want to see it get done my way. So I am curious to see, even if I probably am not going to be super thrilled with how it turns out. I owe it that much is to see it how it was intended.
I guess the kid in me is excited to see Superman in a black suit.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up with Death and Return of Superman. I read those trades till the pages were falling out. So, but yeah, I think as far as DC proper and everything going over there, I feel awful hearing about the layoffs. Of course, I think there's a lot of trepidation of just, in a post AT&T world, what is entertainment going to look like in the macro, and what is it going to look like for DC in on the ground. And I feel like DC, they've been trying new things. Their distribution channel shakeup is kind of is one of them. I don't know how well it's done for them. They say it's been doing well for them. So, God bless if that's the case. Yeah, I feel bad, about the people who've been laid off. There's a lot of senior people who are not going to be here in the next 3 months, and I don't know what that's going to look like for people. Losing Mark Doyle and Andy Corey and Brian Cunningham. I mean, those are major names. I've been actually meaning to sort of figure out, who has survived these purges, So that kind of breaks my heart because, I remember where I came from. I got my start, like you said, as a DC intern. I worked on Batman R.I.P. and Final Crisis and Jeff Johns' Green Lantern. So yeah, I feel for them because I feel like the DC universe has so much untapped potential. And of course, if I ever got called to the majors, I would happily accept. But I think it is a turbulent time right now. And I think there are a lot of creators out there who their careers kind of get caught up in that, which that's the thing I kind of feel worst about. Is, people spend their lives and they spend a great deal of money and a great deal of effort and a great deal of heartache to tell stories so they can eventually make a living at it. And when, it's sort of like going off into a ship in the ocean. Sometimes the tides are not kind. And the comics industry, for every bit of smooth sailing up above, there's a graveyard of broken dreams underneath the surface. And so I do feel bad for that. And in that regard, while if I got called up to the big two tomorrow, I would obviously accept. There's part of me that's not in a rush for that.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of, I want to make sure that I can walk before I can run. And I also, I like the level of control I have over my projects. I know that when I work with my collaborators that I know that we're going to leave it all out in the field because I won't release it if it's not good enough. And when you're in that apparatus of the big two, especially, if you're double shipping a book, you don't get that time to reflect. You don't get that time to rework and rethink things. The train is on the tracks, and if you are not on the train, you are going to get run over. So it's it's a different sport, and I have all the respect in the world for the people who do it. And that's why, watching people's careers get ended or even tarnished because of sort of these corporate backroom intrigue, that bums me out a bit. And it makes me redouble my efforts in the independent scene.
I hear you. I mean, I spent some time in the corporate world, and
Yeah.
having to deal with,
Yeah.
decisions by the board of directors.
Yeah. I mean,
It's unfortunate that a lot of the times people that actually make the product don't have a say.
yes. Yeah. I mean, I worked in corporate as well. I worked at CBS in New York for years before I sold my first book, and exact same thing. I mean, I consider myself grateful that I got out when I did. I mean, the money that I saved working in corporate continues to go towards my comics projects. But, the satisfaction of knowing that, for example, I wouldn't have had to edit a press release from Leslie Moonves defending himself from sexual harassment charges. That's its own kind of piece. I've said that as much as I loved my job there, I don't, what would I have done?
That's not going in your portfolio.
Yeah, that's it's like that's something that I don't know if I could have slept at night having done that. So yeah, it's challenging, and I think there are a lot of people who are certainly worried. The big two are always seen as sort of the gold ring, that people are reaching for, and now it's everything's in flux, and so a lot of people are trying new things, and I think ultimately that's a good thing for the industry. We want to keep evolving, we want to keep growing, we want to keep reaching out to different readerships on different platforms, and I think if we keep doing that, the direct market is going to be in for some major changes, but maybe we can help future-proof that a little bit.
Speaking of new things, the OZ, it's a fantasy classic reimagined for comics.
Mm-hmm.
Haunted by her past, a disillusioned Iraq war veteran must survive the war-torn land of Oz. I mean, that sounds like a fun project to create. I mean, how did you come up with the idea? And even though it's a fantasy book, it looks like it's grounded in reality, especially with the main character struggling with her own inner war.
Yeah, that's a great way to phrase it, by the way. I'm going to steal that. I've been working on the OZ for a long time. This is actually one of the 3 projects that I came up with in the aftermath of Spencer and Locke Volume 1 coming out. So this has been in the works for about 3 years now.
Wow.
So it's a real weight off my shoulders to finally be able to talk about it. For those who don't know my previous work, my sort of breakout book was a book called Spencer and Locke. And the high concept is, what if Calvin and Hobbes grew up in Sin City? And with a high concept like that, it's one of those things, there's no ambiguity. Like, you either succeed wildly or you fail really loudly. It's not, you can't do this quietly. And so I wrote that book with a certain amount of trepidation, just thinking like, oh boy, I don't know if I'm going to get run out of the industry in my first book. And, we worked really hard to make sure it wasn't exploitive and it wasn't just shock for shock value's sake, that we actually, justified our narrative and made characters that people actually cared about. And thankfully that hard work and that risk really paid off, and people really responded to our book in a big and almost universal way. So when the dust settled and I kind of popped my head up and realized, like, okay, it's safe. People haven't run you out of the business. They actually seem to like you for this book. I thought, okay, what's next for me? I guess maybe I'll be a comics writer. And so I thought of 3 books, one of them being Spencer and Locke Volume 2, which I had already had in my back pocket when I pitched Jorge Santiago Jr. in the book. Going to the chapel, because I was the best man at my oldest friend's wedding, and I did a terrible job at it. So that was sort of already kind of percolating. And then the OZ. And the way that came out is, every time I write a book, I walk in with a bucket list of things that I want to do. If I got hit by a bus tomorrow, I would really have wanted to cover these things in my books. And the thing I didn't realize after Spencer and Locke was, oh, that bucket list just grows with every single book. A lot of it is sort of in reaction to what you've just written before. So Spencer and Locke, for example, small, intimate, tight cast. My next book had 16 speaking roles in it, all in one place. Going to the chapel was kind of, low to the ground, it was comparatively small scale. So I wanted to do something that was big and sweeping. What was my Star Wars going to be? And so thinking about different genres, because I'd done crime, because I was working on romantic comedy, I decided, what if I did sci-fi? What if I did fantasy? Sci-fi is hard for me. You got to come up with like a hard and fast rule, and then like the whole world kind of has to spin on that, and it's very easy to either get lost in the weeds with a bunch of just kind of random stuff.
Too many MacGuffins, right?
Yeah, too many MacGuffins. It's a lot. It's not to say that like I'm working on it. Like I've written a sci-fi book since then. Grand Theft Astro. We're still working on it. We're still getting the art together for it. I've written the whole series. Very happy with how it turned out. But at the time, I was just like, oh, sci-fi, that's really hard. Fantasy, on the other hand, there's a lot of metaphor and characterization that's like pre-baked into it, because the rules of magic, you can have them be metaphors for a character's inner state. And so I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. Like, yeah, I'd like to do something in that realm. And so I wrote down a bunch of fantasy things that I had grown up with, and I wrote things like Lord of the Rings. I wrote Lloyd Alexander, Piers Anthony, and I wrote The Wizard of Oz. And as I saw my cursor kind of flashing on the word Oz, I was like, oh, that could be an acronym for something. And I thought, like DMZ. And then I was like, OZ, it's the occupied zone. And that's when like it kind of hit me like a lightning bolt. I was like, oh, this isn't just a fantasy story. It's a war story. And this image of sort of Dorothy being recast as this kind of disillusioned Iraq war veteran, and seeing the Tin Soldier as this kind of, makeshift, rebuilt, towering war machine freedom fighter. I was like, yeah, that's cool. That's a story that I could really kind of sink my teeth into. And so what we've done with the OZ, and this is how I think we've kind of justified it narratively, is, for anybody who's read the original L. Frank Baum novels, who have watched the Judy Garland film, the story of Dorothy getting swept up by the tornado. She crash lands into Oz. She meets 3 extraordinary friends, and she goes and kills the Wicked Witch of the West. And then she clicks her heels 3 times and goes home. That always kind of, as I got older and I grew up, it kind of that really took me out of the story a bit. I came of age during the invasion of Iraq. You kill a tyrant and leave, it's not going to be a happy ending. It invites this a power vacuum. It invites conflict and civil war. So I realized that that's probably what would have happened to the land of Oz. So our story picks up a generation later. Dorothy's granddaughter and namesake is an Iraq war veteran, and she's come home with some real trauma and guilt and scars from her time overseas. But her, while she's trying to put her life back together, a tornado hits, and she's dropped into the war-torn land of Oz. So this new Dorothy is going to have to confront her past, her grandmother's legacy, and her grandmother's former friends if she hopes to survive the occupied zone, or as the locals call it, the OZ.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the cover, I love the logo.
Thank you. I made that logo, so thank you.
Oh, did you? Wow.
That was me.
That's awesome. And the colors are...
Yep. So Reuben Rojas did his own cover. He did both the colors and the line work for his covers. I mean, he is genuinely terrific. But yeah, for our book interiors, Reuben Rojas, rising star artist. He's a superstar in the making. He's like if Dan Mora and Sean Murphy had a baby. Whitney Kogar, the colorist of the Eisner Award-winning Giant Days. We've got DC Hopkins from Ant World Designs on lettering. And yeah, they're really, it's a team of A-listers. I mean, these guys, they all do superior work individually, but then when you sort of put them in the same room together, they just it's magic. So yeah, I love working with these guys. They really inspire. They egg each other on to sort of uh, deliver their A game, and I think that inspires me as well.
Yeah, I've read the first issue is gonna be 44 pages. I've read the first
Yeah.
22, and I must say, one thing I that I've said in the past about your comic books is I love your panel layouts.
Thank you.
They
Thank
they're broken
thank
up.
you.
They're broken up really nicely. The pacing is awesome. Like I said, the colors and
Mhm.
the has right amount of desaturation. It really lends itself to the story.
I appreciate you saying that because those are the two things that I agonize over the most, which is the panel layouts and the colors.
Uh-huh.
So that means the world for me to hear all that because I feel like those are sort of the building blocks of the rest of the book. Ruben and I, we have conversations at the beginning of every issue. When I write these books, I stack the panels in my head, kind of thinking, all right, I only have, an average of 4 to 6 panels per page, not counting a 9 panel grid or a 1 page splash. How am I going to stack this? And so I always talk with my artists about sort of what I had in mind and saying, if you got a better idea, go for it. So yeah, that's a big part of the process. And then yeah, talking with Whitney, we had a lot of conversations early on. During my time as a DC intern, they always said, art will make or break your book, but colors will make or break your art. So we talked a lot about. I said, what's the Mad Max version of Star Wars look like? Because that's what
Ooh, that
I want
sounds so
the
good.
OZ. Because you want that sort of grit and that intensity of Mad Max Fury Road. But the thing about Star Wars is, part of the wonder of it all and part of the stakes and the tension is about the sense of scale. There's so many different planets to explore, whether it's, Endor or Hoth or Dagobah or Tatooine or Cloud City or the trenches of the Death Star. Each of these locations has their own unique palette and temperature and internal high concept, and that's kind of the way Oz is too. The bombed out Emerald City is going to look a lot different than the Deadly Desert, which is going to look a lot different than the mountaintops of Ix, which is going to look a lot different than the Wicked Witch's castle. And Whitney has really keyed into that nicely. So the way that she is able to kind of shift the palette and the energy and the mood of each scene and each setting, it makes for a really inviting and engaging and just plain fun reading experience. I think she helps give the OZ just the right layer of weight to make sure that we're not trivializing anything that anybody has actually lived through, but still it's not even as bleak as say Spencer and Locke. It really is it's an action adventure story that also examines the confronting trauma, confronting your past, and dealing with the moral ramifications of war. How do you make a just decision when every choice you make can wind up with someone dead?
Yep, that's. I'm looking forward to the rest of the book, man.
Thank you.
And how did you find your creative team?
Yeah, it's wild. I found Reuben was the first person I found for the book. He and I. He was answering a call for artists on Twitter. Somebody had asked, looking for artists for stuff. And so, anytime I see something like that, of course I lurk, and so I saw Reuben's stuff and I was just like, how is this guy not a superstar already? He's incredible. And so we got to talking and he was telling me, he's like, I was like, what are the stuff that you like to write? And he mentioned he likes fantasy, he likes post-apocalyptic. And I was like, oh, dude, I got the book for you. And he gravitated towards the OZ like immediately. Like he was so good at it. And so yeah, I've had a lot of fun working with him. He is just the full package. He's very talented in the way he composes his panels. He's able to shift from exciting action to really engaging emotion and drama, really at the drop of a hat. But he's also such a talented designer. He's done such incredible work with all of our settings, really making them feel fleshed out and three-dimensional. This is not a guy who shies away at a crowd scene. And the way he designs our characters is just so incredible. You all seen at this point, you can check it out on our Kickstarter, Reuben's main cover for the series, which, he had done 6 pages in a cover, just sort of as like pitch pages for us to have something to share to potential publishers, but also just to make sure that we like felt good about each other. And I saw that cover and I said, Reuben, keep working. I promise you, come hell or high water, I will get this book made. His work is just so astronomically good that I was like, it is not fair to live in a world that nobody knows who Reuben Rojas is, and I am so glad that people they're already starting to change that.
Mm-hmm. And how did you come across Whitney?
Whitney in DC. Yeah. I always want to thank my pal Michael Mocchio. We came up in the trenches together at Newsarama. I was his very first editor. I recruited him as a reviewer when he was still in college. He's gone on to do so many incredible things, working at Boom Studios. Now he's at Scholastic. He's doing some work at Mad Cave. But we've been, friends for almost a decade at this point. And, I hit him up when I was working on the OZ saying, hey, working on this book. I'm looking for some names. You got anything in mind? And he was like, I love working with Whitney Kogar and DC Hopkins. He worked with them over at Boom. He was like, they are terrific. You really should look them up. So I was lucky enough. I actually ran into DC Hopkins shortly thereafter at Denver Comic-Con, I believe. And we immediately hit it off. He's such a sweet guy, super gracious, super good-natured, just a real oasis of calm for our creative team, which I think is something that we desperately need since I'm a little high-strung. And just ultimate team player, super patient. He and I talk a lot about sort of the relationship of our word balloons versus the art around them. And so he's very patient with me when I realized, that, my 22 words per balloon rule, sometimes that flies out the window if you're writing big words. Realizing, I got to cut half a balloon. Whitney was, sort of the final member of the team. I'm very picky when it comes to my colorists, because, like I said, they make or break a book. I approached Whitney and just was really blown away by her work. Like I said, she adds so much energy and mood to all of our pages, and she takes Reuben's already superlative artwork and just brings it up to an even higher level. I mean, it's funny when Whitney sees Reuben's pages, she's like, these pages are incredible. And then when Reuben sees Whitney's colors, he's like, this is amazing. And that's always what I want. I want to make sure, I didn't invent peanut butter and I didn't invent jelly. I'm just the guy who looked into bringing them on the same sandwich. And that's always my goal on this, is I want to make sure it's sort of the hardest part of the job. It's the single most important part of the job to me, is making sure that we have a colorist who is going to do right by our artist. It's not always even going to be the same for every book. I've worked with plenty of amazing colorists who I don't think could have colored Reuben the way that Whitney does. And vice versa. I mean, I don't know if we didn't have Jason Smith working on Spencer and Locke, I don't know how that book would have worked. It's a lot of trial and error. I don't think I've ever had a book where the first person I approached for colors wound up being the person who was on colors. So it takes a lot, but it's absolutely worth it in the end.
Now, you mentioned that this is the first of 3 Kickstarters.
Yes.
How far ahead have you planned the OZ?
Yeah, so I've written the whole series. Series is done. It's written. I'm really happy with how the story turned out. I think we stuck the landing, and so Reuben and Whitney are in the middle of our second installment now. Right now we're looking at, and we're going to do all of these issues double sized. Right now we're looking at probably we're going to be trying to fulfill in December, as long as everything is cool with the post office.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Like the first issue is done. We're just working on just clearing it for production. And we announced recently that because our Kickstarter did so well, we're actually enhancing our book. So we're going to be adding in some pinups. We're going to be exploring what we can do with enhanced covers. So we're sort of getting those ducks in a row right now. But first issue's done. So that's a relief. I wouldn't have felt comfortable Kickstartering it if that wasn't the case. So yeah, we're working on the art side of part 2 right now. Every single book is going to be 44 pages, so that's cool. And I think beyond that, I wrote the OZ as something that could be considered standalone, but if the demand is there, and I can tell you, just 5 days into it, the demand has certainly been very, very high. I always travel with an idea in my back pocket. In the OZ, there could always be another battle right around the corner. And I have a pretty strong idea of where we could take this series next.
Cool. The code name for the OZ was Project Saffron.
Yeah.
Saffron is one of the world's most expensive spices. Glad to see from your Kickstarter that the OZ isn't one of the most expensive comic books.
Yes.
Like I said earlier, it was funded in about 2 hours this past Monday, August 17th. So congratulations once again.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's one of those things that like you hope for the best, but you always prepare for the worst. But you can't prepare for 450% funding. It's like the height of egotism. It feels like going down the street for a sandwich and winding up on the moon. There's no preparing for that. And so that's sort of my challenge during this campaign is, okay, how do we keep building on our readership? How do we keep introducing the book to new people? But at the same time, we never want it to even have the appearance of it being a cash grab, because that's not what I do. I mean, all this money is just going towards our next issues. So we've been looking at ways to enhance the book, like I said. And we've also been looking for a way to offer new rewards for people, just to sort of say like, hey, like we recognize everything you've done. We want to give you something else. And so that becomes a calculus of what fits in your in your mailing system. A lot of the things that I'm shipping are going to be in Gemini mailers. Once we get a more than one comic, then we start going into priority mail. So then we're able to do a little bit more there. Once you get into all 4 issues plus trades, then we get into a priority box. That offers us more opportunities. So, between doing that and figuring out what can we fulfill digitally, like I don't know when this will be running, but for example, starting on Monday, we're going to start a social stretch goal. We're going to have a tweet up, and if it hits a certain number of likes and retweets, we're going to unlock a specially recorded theme song for the OZ. Just a really beautiful and haunting piece of music. And every single backer will get an audio file of that when the campaign is over. So Sunday night I said to myself, okay, what stops am I going to have to pull out in order for us to make our $6,000 goal within the 30 days? And now that has changed dramatically, and it's just how do we build the widest possible readership, and how can we keep adding value to the book, and what other things can we add in store? I've been in contact with a number of artists for pinups. Some of them for this issue, others just to kind of have in reserve if this happens again for the next issue. But yeah, it's blown me away. I couldn't be more excited, more grateful. Really, everybody's come together to really lift this book up. My readership from Spencer and Locke and Going to the Chapel, Comics Press has been incredibly gracious. Retailers have been wonderful, and I got to say, comic creators, all the creators who I've known, at a distance as a reviewer, they've all been so supportive since I stepped away from my reviewer job. And we had people like Scott Snyder, Gail Simone, Mark Russell, Kevin Eastman from the co-creator of the Ninja Turtles, Jimmy Palmiotti, Becky Cloonan. They've all thrown in, Jim Zub. They've all thrown in and all sort of signal boosted our book. And I think that has been incredible. That is really, their endorsement, I think, has made a lot of people think, oh, this seems really cool. And it helps kind of bring in that direct market audience. And it introduces them to that Kickstarter audience. And that's always been my goal, is just invite them to the same table and let them break bread. So, I feel like we captured lightning in a bottle in a crazy way. I think Scott Snyder starting his campaign on the same day was a huge windfall for us. It brought so many people into the Kickstarter ecosystem. And, for those who aren't familiar with how Kickstarter works, it's in their business model to keep people in the ecosystem. So if you buy Scott Snyder's Nocturnal, you will get, there will be advertisement for other comics, and the OZ winds up being at the top of the list. It's incredibly humbling. And I think it really, I couldn't be more grateful because it really empowers Reuben and I to tell these kinds of stories, giant size, the way that we want to.
Yeah, not only has other comic book creators signal boosted your project, but they've also contributed, I guess, to the digital rewards, the $25,000 stretch goal. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we've got a ton of creators who have volunteered to send us PDFs of some of their coolest work. We've got Justin Jordan. He's given us the first issue of Luther, The Strange Talent of Luther Strode and Spread. We've got Frank Gogol. He's given us PDFs, I believe, of Dead End Kids, his breakout book from last year. Ryland Grant from Aberrant and Banjax and the recent Kickstarter, The Jump, he's throwing in. I was so proud about this. Kevin Eastman, the co-creator of the Ninja Turtles, he's actually graciously giving us the first issue PDF of his semi-autobiographical crime series, Drawing Blood. I couldn't be more excited. 7-year-old me is probably fainting at this. And plenty more creators waiting in the wings. We're going to do something around a dozen creators, I think, maybe a little more. But we have so many people who are throwing in that we're preparing for the next Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. And we're saying, okay, we don't want to, we want to make sure that we are able to leave something for the next one. But yeah, it's just, couldn't be, it's just another example of the greater comics industry kind of coming together to raise us up, and it means the world.
It's evident that your outreach game is on point. I mean, this is your first Kickstarter, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think can be attributed to your success for this campaign? And tell me more about the marketing side of indie comic books.
Sure. It's some of it is just pure luck. Like I said, us coming out the same day as Scott Snyder, hugely helpful. The fact that I kind of had heard that Scott was going to be releasing the same day as us in advance helped me out in a big way, so I didn't panic. When it was actually game time. Those things you can't account for. We literally launched our campaign in what I think is probably the single best day to launch a campaign in recent memory. So there's that. I think by virtue of me having put out previous books that people seem to have responded to over the last few years, I think that was extremely helpful. I had already built up relationships with the comics press. And so, a lot of times people, I know this happened to me when I was a reviewer all the time, people would try to send me Kickstarter stuff. And, Newsarama, our focus is kind of really primarily on the direct market, especially, the big two, or really the big seven, I guess. So, it wasn't something that we would ordinarily cover. And I think, I'm sure that a lot of these outlets that we talked to would have said the same thing if I was a stranger. But because I'd known them for several years at this point, and because they knew they'd read my work and they knew that like we could deliver at a certain level, and this specific high concept, has a pretty wide audience range, that helped us out a great deal. I wasn't expecting, for example, IGN to want to cover us, and it was kind of just a shot in the dark, because I've had other books that I've pitched to them, and it wasn't their bag. It's fine. And they were saying, actually, like, we really like this concept. We think it reminds us of Scooby Apocalypse, which did really well for us. And, I offered them Mon House's variant cover as an exclusive. And they were saying, oh, that really helped us out too. That really, like, that image was really striking. And it really kind of, it drew a lot of eyes and a lot of attention. So, some of it's sort of feeling your way through the dark and, hoping you don't step on a nail. I feel like, for me, my game plan has just been leave no stone unturned, stay plugged into social media, see what people are saying about you, respond to people as quickly as you can. The thing I haven't done yet that I really need to do, hopefully sometime this weekend, is I just need to go through every single backer and just send them a message thanking them. We just haven't been able, given the sheer number of people that have joined, we haven't been able to do that one-to-one yet. But yeah, I would tell people who, this is my first Kickstarter, but it's not my first book. And so people should, be patient and empathetic with themselves and not beat themselves up if they do a Kickstarter and it's not 450% funded, in the first week. I'm an anomaly. I'm the aberration here. But I do think that, building relationships, both with the press, with your peers, people who are running Kickstarters. Like, I'm working right now on an update of what are some other cool Kickstarters you can follow, just to sort of spread the love a little bit. But yeah, I think, there's that. And then I think for me, when it comes to a creative standpoint, for me, the creative standpoint and the marketing, I think they're a little tied together. I always want to make sure that the books that I work on are accessible, and you don't need to have a PhD in comics history to make sense of them. That's kind of why I work with universal themes. I mean, most people through cultural osmosis know what Calvin and Hobbes or the Wizard of Oz are. And for going to the chapel, have you ever been to a wedding? Have you ever been in love? Have you ever had a member of a dysfunctional family? Most people can relate to at least one of those things. So yeah, I think just leave no stone unturned. Just keep pounding the pavement. I've had people tell me, this is sort of the dead zone of the Kickstarter, and ask me again in a week. Maybe I'll have changed my tune. But right now, I refuse to believe that. I feel like there's always outreach that can be done. There's always new people you can talk with. There's always, even if I do a Kickstarter or if I do a podcast for an hour and it only gets 2 new followers, fine. If that's what it takes, that's what it takes. I owe it to myself, and I owe it to my creative team to get as many people on board for this book as possible. And, I've got some lofty goals now, and I think, just kind of keeping my nose to the grindstone, I feel really confident that we can do it.
Yeah, I've only known you for 3 years, but during the course of those 3 years, I've noticed you, like you said, sticking your nose to the grindstone. You've been working hard. You've been patient, like you said, empathy, building relationships, creating books that are accessible. I think people downplay the long game a lot, but I think it's important.
Yeah, it's you really hit it on the head right there. My younger siblings are triplets. They're about a decade younger than me, and I was already out here in Los Angeles, and my brother, for example, had just moved to LA, and he was looking to do a career in screenwriting, and I think it gave him a lot of anxiety. Sort of, he was seeing how things were working for me out here and being like, well, why isn't this happening for me? And I had to tell him that, well, when I was in my mid 20s, nothing worked for me. It's, you gotta, this is the long game, your success comes from your relationships, but your relationships are the products of years of knowing people. It's really a 10-year process. I mean, this, like, if you looked at me on paper, you'd say, oh, wow, this is, his first Kickstarter and he's doing really well. But if you really looked at the big picture, I've been chiseling away at the comics industry since 2008. So, every sort of overnight success story is really a 10-year process. So that's why I encourage people just to be patient with themselves and to pace themselves. Start small. Really, small repetition will take you so much further than just trying to try to play for the Yankees on your first swing at bat. And I think, ultimately, if people want to do comics, pacing themselves, that you just have to. You can't burn yourself out doing these things if you want to do this long term. So, just be patient with yourself. And I think just, keep putting yourself out there and just keep meeting people and keep doing outreach. And that, I've found, at least in my career, is taken me much further than I have any right to go.
Awesome. Thanks for those awesome words of.
Thank you.
I mean, those were all gold right there.
Thank you. I've had a lot of time to think about it. So, that's what I've been doing during the pandemic.
Right. I guess we'll just take a little break and we'll do a thunder round.
Let's do it.
What are your 3 favorite video games of all time, and why did you pick those?
Ooh, Fallout. Fallout 4 specifically. I've had to ban myself from that game because I wouldn't get any work done. Love the graphics, love how immersive it is, love the world building of it all, love the designs. Chrono Trigger, love that game. Love sort of putting all these really strong archetypes in a room together and then watching them play off each other. I guess the third and final one. I guess I would say Rise of the Tomb Raider. That's a really fun action game. It's just, beautifully realized, really fun to watch. And I will say that all 3 of those games were pretty big influences on the OZ.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I never played Chrono Trigger, but that was back in the Super Nintendo days, right?
Yeah. It was. I love that game. It breaks my heart they haven't done a remaster yet for any of the other systems. But yeah, it's this kind of really cool time traveling game. But if you've played Final Fantasy VII, it's sort of cut from the same.
I remember the artwork was based on like Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
Artwork, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so, super fun game. You've got sort of your basic swordsman as your sort of avatar character, but then you've got his best friend who's the gearhead and the princess he's got to save. But then you go back in time and you meet a cursed knight who's been cursed to look like a frog. You've got, he's been chasing down this evil sorcerer, and that's a big plot point in the game, is whether you kill him or he joins your team. There's a robot from like an post-apocalyptic future who joins your team. There's a cave woman from prehistoric times that joins your team. Having all of those together, like you wouldn't expect it to work, but they're all so strong in their archetypes that they hold their own. And that's something that I think really worked for the Wizard of Oz. Dorothy, the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, the Lion. They have very distinct designs and personalities and wants and character arcs, and then you put them in the room together and sparks start to fly, and neither of them loses their shape. It's sort of iron strengthens iron. And so, yeah, it's very, it was fun kind of remixing those characters in certain ways and taking their core characteristics and sort of following them to the logical conclusion in the other. It gave me a lot of wiggle room and a lot of room to maneuver as far as this book was concerned.
Nice. What statement would you have Bart from The Simpsons write on the chalkboard?
I will not take too many projects at once.
It's 10 p.m. and you're starving after a full day of writing. What
Mhm.
kind of pizza do you order?
Um, do I have unlimited money or no?
Sure.
If I have unlimited money, I'm ordering. I'm my hometown pizza place does do national shipping. Emo's Pizza. I would be ordering that well in advance so I could have it for when I have a hungry day. If I don't have a time machine though, and I got to do it spur of the moment, I feel guilty saying this. If I'm that broken at 10 o'clock at night and I haven't eaten, I'm getting some Papa John's and I'm just hate eating it. Uh, it's I hate how comforting it is, but it's so comforting. So yeah, that's where I go. Sorry, fans, please back my book. Don't hate me for this. I know I'm a monster.
What toppings would you put?
I'm a purist. I'm just a cheese man.
Nice. I can dig it. I can dig it.
Or maybe some red pepper flakes. I do like that.
Cool. King Kong or Godzilla?
Ooh, Godzilla.
Awesome. Me too.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think I've liked more King Kong movies, but I like Godzilla as a character more. It's just more visually interesting to me. I like the mythology more, of all the different, other kaiju that Godzilla winds up fighting. So yeah, the edge is going to go towards Godzilla, although I'm sure with Godzilla versus King Kong, when that movie comes out, I'll probably be rooting for Kong.
If Jack Kirby was still alive, what would you ask him?
Oh man. I guess just how do you put in the reps? Just how do you operate at that level? He'd probably be really annoyed with that question too. No, I guess a question that would not get Jack mad at me was I would probably just ask, like, what's the thing that you really want to do that you haven't done yet?
That's a good one. You're usually a guest on panels at comic conventions. If
Sure.
you could create and moderate your own panel, what would it be about and who would be your guests?
It'd probably be talking about a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, how do you produce your first comic? So I've been on those a few times, but I always really enjoy those, or something about writing specifically. I'd be happy with either of those. People that I'd love to have on the panel, again, are also people that I've had on panels with me before. I think Charlie Stickney from White Ash would be an amazing perspective, no matter who you got.
He's always good.
I think Justin Jordan, I consider to be a real influence on sort of my career, my business side. Frank Gogol, I think, is sort of a real up and comer. His hustle is second to none.
He had a great panel at Mainframe.
Yeah. Rylan Grant, he's terrific with that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm sure I can think of at least one more person, and Erica Schultz has a lot of interesting perspectives on things, or Alex DeCampi. I feel like I've been in a few panels with Erica. We don't know each other very well, but she's I think very smart and has a lot of hard won knowledge. And I'd say Alex is probably the same way. Yeah, but I mean, there's so many people that you could, have on that I think would be really interesting. Greg Pak, I've interviewed him before. Very smart guy.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Snyder has been in the trenches for a long time. He's got a lot of wisdom to share as an educator. I think also just talking to people who have been in the press trenches for a long time. Chris Arant, I think, is a really good resource. I think David Harper is an incredible interviewer. So yeah, I think, Heidi McDonald, I think, is one of the, has probably the deepest institutional knowledge in comics. So yeah, I think for me, it would just be sort of getting a wide variety of perspectives and, how people do business, and then just put them in a room together.
Awesome. Spending more time at home during the pandemic has given me the opportunity to watch all sorts of things like Star Wars, Clone Wars, Donnie Yen movies, and believe it or not, skateboarding videos. Anything interesting that you've come across lately?
Yeah. Boy. Let's see. There was the Borderlands Telltale game. Really enjoyed that. My reward for myself when this campaign is wrapped is I'm going to download that Avengers demo. I keep watching people talk about it.
Right.
It kills me inside. Yeah, I watched Predator 2 for the first time in the pandemic, and I love it.
Oh, the one with Danny Glover, right?
So good.
Yeah.
I honestly like that way more than I like the first one.
Really?
Yeah. What else have I discovered during this convention? You know, there was the Golden State Killer documentary. Let's see. What was it? It's like You'll Be Alone in the Dark. I'll Be Gone in the Dark. Thank you.
Have you watched Mindhunter?
Yes.
Okay.
I watched Mindhunter. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other shows that I watched. I did watch this documentary on Disney Plus about training seeing eye dogs. I thought that was very cute.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, beyond that, it's just been kind of like some of it's been comfort food. Some of it has just been finding ways to kind of de-stress or unwind. There was what was it called? I think it was hold on, I'm going to look up the title of this awesome game that I got on Monster Prom. That's it. Monster Prom on Switch. That's been my guilty pleasure. I laugh every time I put that game on. But yeah, for me, honestly, COVID is really just giving me a lot more focus, if anything else. I wasn't dealing with cons. I wasn't dealing with even sort of the pressure of like, what is everybody else putting out? Diamond was shut down for, what was it, a month, 2 months? And that was actually like surprisingly good on my mental health. I was able to just kind of focus and do my work. And yeah, it felt like I was, kind of running on the treadmill every day. It was really nice. It felt very fulfilling. Both creatively and in terms of reducing my anxiety levels.
And my final question of the Thunder Round is, what does Captain Planet look like in the David Pepose universe?
Man, Aaron, that I have a pitch that would make your toes curl. Captain Planet has been my white whale for so long. It's just such a cool concept that I think it was so ahead of its time. There's so many cool things you can do with the Planeteers and their powers and their personalities. There's only a little bit of shifting you have to do to anybody's backstory to make them fit really, really well in today's geopolitical arena. Mm-hmm. The fact that it's inherently international, it's inherently diverse. I want to write Captain Planet so badly. Because I think that's a character that, just by product of its time and by product of sort of what animation standards were at the time, I think never really got its just due. And, I think you could have like a really cool globe-trotting, environmentally conscious thriller that's like, equal parts the first Avengers movie with Avatar, The Last Airbender, with sort of that cool recontextualization of it all that the first Michael Bay Transformers film had. There's so many cool things you can do with that concept.
Yeah, and, it seems like it would be relevant for today's times.
Exactly. I mean, so, it's one of those things. I'm not holding out onto a ton of hope. Captain Planet, it's owned by Turner Communications, which is owned by Warner Brothers. Ted Turner himself kind of personally spearheaded Captain Planet as a project. It was his pet project. So I think, they're probably holding on to that for dear life. I don't think they would be licensing that out to Boom or IDW or Dynamite. And that probably means that DC is the one that holds the rights to it. And just given everything going on over there and the way they're shrinking their line, I don't see them taking a shot on Captain Planet anytime soon. But, a man can dream. And if I could ever figure out a way to kind of put my own angle on it that doesn't require those characters, I'd file the serial numbers off and do something great around. So, never say never. It's a bucket list book. I want to write it so badly.
Well, hopefully you find a Lazarus pit and you can hold out. You can hold out till what, 2095 or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Then it'll be the deep nostalgia cut.
Awesome. Did we miss anything that you want to, I guess, let our audience know about the OZ?
It's like I've said, it's Mad Max and the Hurt Locker meets the Wizard of Oz. It's a book that we didn't write it for shock value. We really worked hard to make sure that we justified this series narratively, that we wrote characters that you'll care about and that you'll root for, and that we're treating them with empathy and dignity and respect. We're not punching down, because that would mean that we're not treating our readers with empathy and respect. So it's Kickstarter, so every backer matters, every dollar counts, and we've worked really hard to make sure that everybody's getting the most bang for their buck. Not only is this issue going to be 44 pages of story, so you're getting double the amount that you would for a normal comic. We're adding pinups to the mix. We're enhancing our covers. We are including a lot of rewards in every single tier. Every single backer gets the first issue of Spencer and Locke and the first issue of Going to the Chapel digitally for free. That's just from the first tier on. That is something that you get, because we want to make sure that you're getting bang for your buck. So that's already 88 pages there, plus the digital comics extravaganza. So that's going to be at least another dozen comics. So you're getting hundreds of pages, even if you just throw in $5 or $10. We've got an amazing series of variant covers as well. We've got some extra rewards like Skype sessions with me if you want to do a portfolio review or a pitch review, or talk about Kickstarter or Hollywood or publicity, and you can set the agenda. We've got some commissions left over from Reuben Rojas. Any character you want, he'll do a black and white head sketch of. We've even got some ultra limited edition Spencer and Locke plushies. We've got, I think, 2 of them. I had 10 of them made for my creative team, and these are what I have left. So, there's something to be had for every single layer of budget. So we want to invite as many people to the table as possible, and we want to make sure that you feel like you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. I've also forgot to mention that we've got a ton of behind the scenes material included in almost all of our tiers as well. People are going to get copies of my scripts. People are going to get at the $15 mark and above. You'll also get Reuben Rojas's untouched inks, as well as Whitney Kogar's raw colors. So the process junkies can kind of get a sense of how this book came together as well. You may think the story of Oz, but this is the story of what comes next. So we want everybody to become a yellow brick road warrior. So join us today in the trenches of the OZ.
Awesome! I can't wait to finish the first issue.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for your support. And anybody listening, we'd love to have you on board.
Where can people find you online?
Sure. They can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at PeposeD. They can also follow David Pepose Comics on Facebook. I have a newsletter called Pep Talks, where I talk about what I'm working on. I answer reader questions about, behind the scenes. I give reading recommendations. You can subscribe to that at bit.ly/pepnews. We'd love to have more people on the mailing list. You can also follow the OZ on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the OZ Comic.
Awesome. Thank you so much for tuning into the Holiday Show podcast, where we love showcasing independent comic book creators like David Pepose. Please check out the Kickstarter for the OZ, which ends on Wednesday, September 16th, 2020. If you believe in our mission to be the voice of independent pop culture creators, we would love a rating, hopefully 5 stars, and a comment on Apple Podcasts. You can also find us on Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Stitcher. Also, please share our episodes using the hashtag HallHShow. Peace, cheers, and if you'd like to recommend a guest for our show, please reach out to us on any of our social media accounts or our website, hallh.com.